Okay, welcome to the 1 pound plant masterclass. My name is Chad, and I actually have been growing hydroponically since 2014, and it all started with tower gardens. I started to create these indoor growth environments to optimize my tower garden grows for these large vegetable bounties. And then I started Humble Growth Hydroponics, which is my YouTube channel all about hydroponics. And then I started the School of Hydroponics, teaching people how to grow hydroponically. And then I did Master Your Tower Garden. And all of this was long before I ever tackled my first cannabis plant. So when I did finally tackle my first cannabis plant, it was a monster. It was huge. Because I already knew how to optimize everything, my first plant ended up harvesting 15.5 ounces, which is only half an ounce shy of the 1 pound mark. So that showed me that this is a formula. This is something that I could repeat. All I really need to do is learn about training. So I learned how to train my plant because that was the only thing I hadn't really done on that first grow. So I trained my second grow. This is my second grow. This is the plant that I used for the entire 1 pound plant course, actually. And this one ended up harvesting well over a pound. And that's because all of these were really dense buds, because I trained it, I optimized my lighting, my airflow. I had every bud in good lighting. I took everything that I knew already and I implemented it to grow a 1 pound plant. So before we get started on the masterclass, make sure you download the equipment guide, which is a totally free guide which goes over all the gear and gives you links for all the gear that I use to grow my 1 pound plants consistently. And if you're not already in the school group, make sure you go join the school group, because you'll get to meet up with other people who are growing the 1 pound plants, maybe people who are even going through the 1 pound plant course, and you guys can discuss your grows. You'll also find me over on the school community answering questions and helping people out with their grows. I put together this formula because this all equals 100%, what we're looking at here, right? So 100% is the mark, the 1 pound plant. If we don't have any one of these 4 things, then we're not gonna hit that 1 pound plant. But the way I broke this down is basically by how they'd fill out the pie chart of 100%, which ones are gonna be more important than the others. 15% of your 1 pound plant is going to come from the genetics. Not every seed can grow a 1 pound plant. In this masterclass, actually, we're going to be going over every one of these things. We're going to be going over these each one by one and breaking down how and why to use each one of these 4 parts of this formula to grow the 1 pound plant. So I'm just going to touch on these real quick and then we'll get into them a lot more. So first, genetics. Not every seed can grow a 1 pound plant. You have to make sure you know if your seed can grow really big, dense buds first. 25% comes down to environmental control and hydro. So I grow in hydro. I've been growing in hydroponics for a long time. Hydroponics grows big plants. We'll get into why in a little later here, but also your environmental control, meaning the air, the winds, the temperature, the humidity, all the stuff that has to do with the environment for where your plant's growing. Then plant training. So my first plant, I didn't train at all. I just kind of let it go crazy. I did some defoliation on the bottom, but I didn't really train it. That's why I didn't reach the full pound. My second plant, I trained so that the light was hitting just 1 layer of buds, and that's why I was able to reach the 1 pound mark. Training has a lot to do with your plant's ability to take everything else you've given it and maximize it. And finally, lighting. So 35% comes down to lighting. Lighting is the most important thing when you're considering growing that 1 pound plant, and I'll get into why here very shortly. First, let's talk more about genetics. So I made this list here. These are just a few strains that I know are capable of growing 1 pound plants. I will say a little asterisk by the green gelato there at the very top. That one, you can grow a 1 pound plant. You definitely need to do a Scrog technique, which I'll explain what that is later. And I love that plant. It's just, you might want to save that one for your second or third grow, because that one, it grows a bunch of smaller buds, which are really nice and dense, but they don't become really big buds. So you need to make sure that you really have your Scrog technique and your defoliation, your lollipopping, everything about training your plant, you really need to have down before you try to grow that green gelato to a 1 pound plant. Everything else though will have no problem hitting 1 pound plants. One of my personal favorites is Blue Dream down there. Blue Dream is a sativa dominant. It grows monster buds. It's really great for beginners. It's very forgiving plant. So if you want a really great beginners, if this is your first grow ever, which by the way, I do guarantee if you follow my steps here, this masterclass is a really great stepping stone. We'll get into the course here momentarily, but if you follow my steps and everything that I use to grow, you will grow a 1 pound plant, even if you've never grown before. You know, my very first time ever growing, I almost grew a 1 pound plant. There's no reason why if you don't follow my steps, you can't do the same, right? So Blue Dream, if this is your very first try, is a really great seed to start off with. Gorilla Glue is fantastic. I love Gorilla Glue. Big Bud. Shotgun is one of my favorites if you like sativas. That one's really huge buds, huge THC. Really fantastic strain there. So let me move on past the strains. Just make sure that you know the strain that you've picked out is capable of growing a 1 pound plant. And that's actually something you can usually just search on Google, or when you're looking at the seeds from where you decide to buy your seeds. I usually get mine from Seed Supreme. I know that Royal Queen Seeds is also a good distributor. So I can't say one's better than the other, but wherever you decide to pick your seeds, usually they'll tell you if they'll grow really big buds or not. So that's definitely something you need to look for. The other thing you want to consider when picking out your seeds is a sativa versus indica. You know, a sativa is what I usually prefer, and that's going to be a more head high, a more racy, a more energetic high, something that's more functional. And indica is a lot more couchy. It's going to be a lot more that body, that relaxation. You know, it's good for like pain management or sleep, right? And they actually grow differently too. Sativas are going to grow taller and skinnier, and indicas are going to go shorter and bushier. So that's something to be aware of as well whenever you go into growing it. But the biggest thing, I think the biggest consideration with sativas and indicas when it comes to your 1 pound plant is the amount of time, the growth cycle. So sativas grow for significantly longer, up to 1.5 months to 2 months longer, some strains. So if you want buds fast, then I would go with an indica, but you're not going to get as much weight as you would with sativa. So that's really your call. Okay, so now let's get into the environment and the type of garden that we're going to be using. That accounts for 25% of the total success of our 1 pound plant garden. I think managing the environment really means the difference between a plant surviving and a plant thriving, right? Because this is our opportunity to give our plant not just what it needs, but give it more than what it needs. So first, the type of garden. Let's talk hydroponics. Why hydroponics? Well, because the nutrients are always available in the water, because transpiration can always happen, meaning that the nutrients are always being absorbed through the roots, up through the stems, out into the leaves, and then are leaving through the stomata and absorbing more CO2. That's happening all the time in a hydroponic garden. That only happens when you water the soil in a soil garden, and then it slows down quite a bit. Hydroponic gardens, your plant's always taking the nutrients in, it's always working, so to speak, and the nutrients are always going to be right there and they're accessible. So if you ever have an issue, also we can adjust it with hydroponic nutrients much faster than you can in soil. Hydroponics is just a far superior method. I've grown way more 1 pound plants with hydro. I have friends who grow in soil and they can't even get close to 1 pound plant. So every other variable they will meet, like the lighting and the environment, but they always fall short to that 1 pound mark, and I really feel it's probably because they're not using hydroponics. That only makes sense to me. So in the 1 pound plant guide, we use the deep water culture. In this masterclass, I would recommend the same. A deep water culture is a really great way to grow hydroponically. What that entails is just, I usually use a 5-gallon bucket, and I'll just put the net cup right in the top there, and then just put an air stone in the bottom connected to an air pump, and that delivers fresh oxygen into the water. It also keeps the water moving so it never really gets stagnant, and the nutrients are nice and mixed around in your deep water culture. You can grow monster plants out of a deep water culture. You can grow really, really big plants. Like I said, I've grown well over pound plants, 20-ounce plants in a deep water culture before. So when it comes to growing the biggest plants, deep water culture, hydroponics is the absolute way to go. You'll also realize after I explain it to you that it's a lot easier than you might have thought it was. And then if you need even more education and information, you should check out the 1 pound plant complete course. This is a full step-by-step video and course breakdown of everything that you need to know to grow a 1 pound plant. This is 30 videos and 30 written courses with step-by-step guidance from me. We go over all of my technique in both videos and in written guides. And I want to tell you about this now because if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to waste your time and you just want to go jump into a course and start learning step by step exactly what you need to do, then you're going to stop watching this masterclass right now and go get the 1 pound plant course. But if you want the outline, if you want to know even more about growing the 1 pound plant and you want to stick around for this masterclass, it is definitely a great value. You will learn the outline and what you need to know to get started growing that 1 pound plant. So let's keep going. So why does the environment matter for photosynthesis? Well, as I talked about before, transpiration is that pool of water and nutrients up through the roots and out through the leaves. Now, if it's happening up top where the environment is, without the stomata releasing the old oxygen and the old water particularly, it can't take in more carbon dioxide and the transpiration pool is slowed down. So the pool actually happens because the stomata is breathing and releasing oxygen and releasing water. And so because of that, it's actually pulling water up from the roots. So things that highly affect transpiration when talking about the environment are like humidity, temperature, too much wind, or too much light. First, let's talk about humidity. If the humidity outside of the leaf is the same as the humidity inside of the leaf, then nothing will really happen. If the humidity outside has to be lower than the humidity inside in order for the leaf to be able to breathe and release its water and oxygen. Next, temperature. If the temperature outside is too hot, then you could find the leaf is over-transpiring. If it's too cold, it won't transpire at all. One of the biggest problems is stale air. If there's no moving air under the leaf, then the water will just sit there and nothing will actually happen. It'll raise the humidity. You need to have gentle moving air across the stomata to move away the old water vapor and oxygen and bring in that fresh CO2. Now, at nighttime, transpiration does slow down significantly, but it definitely still happens in hydroponic gardens. So you will see a humidity rise at night for sure. So how do we really optimize our environment to get a 1 pound plant? This means we have to take all of the environmental variables into consideration and into our own hands. We have to kind of play God here, right? So the first thing we need is a grow space. We need that 4x4 grow tent, no smaller than a 4x4. Larger is okay, but 4x4 really has been perfect for the scrogging method and growing a 1 pound plant. And you really will need a grow tent, not just because it has those reflective walls and it's a place that we can control the lighting, but also a grow tent offers you a place where you can hang your lights, where you can clip your fans. It becomes a space that is highly controlled just for our plant. You're gonna have to put exhaust through it to move the air out of the tent while having fans move the air in the tent to keep the environment set the way it needs to be. We also need to make sure we get a hygrometer, something that can measure the relative humidity and temperature, because those are really important factors with the environment. By optimizing our environment, we're giving our plant exactly what it needs to grow to that 1 pound mark. We need to make sure that the temperature is not too high and not too low for several reasons. The canopy can get really damaged by heat. The trichomes could start to actually melt if it gets too hot, and then you're gonna lose out on overall THC. We need to make sure we have plenty of airflow just to bring in the amount of carbon dioxide that the plant's gonna need to even hit this 1 pound mark. And I found the only way to really do that is to have a nice 4x4 grow tent with ventilation that's bringing this air in, and an air conditioner if you need it, a dehumidifier if you need it, or a humidifier if you need it to keep the humidity and the temperature exactly where we need it to be. All right, next let's talk about lighting. This is the big one. Without lighting, you're not going to hit a 1 pound plant. And the reason that is because what I've noticed is if we have everything optimized, then we can count on the golden ratio working. Meaning if we have the environment and the garden and everything else completely optimized, we've trained the plant, then the golden ratio will apply. And the golden ratio is 1 gram per 1 watt of light power. So the light that I've used several times and I recommend for growing the 1 pound plant is the AC Infinity Evo 6, because this is a 500 watt light and it uses those 500 watts very, very effectively. So as you level up as a gardener and get better and better and have more and more experience, then you'll actually start to harvest far more than a 1 pound plant, because this light is capable of growing at least 500 grams. That's more than 1 pound. The light is the biggest area where I see people try to cut corners, use cheap lights, not measure their light. That's something we're gonna get into in just a minute here. And then they wonder why their buds got all larfy and never really got that dense or heavy. And it comes down to the lighting, 100%. So if you want a light that can grow a 1 pound plant, then this AC Infinity Evo 6, I have it linked up in the whole guide for everything that I use for my 1 pound plant. In the course, I tell the students if they use another light, I can't guarantee the 1 pound plant. How to measure your PAR. Now, when I was in photography school, we used light meters to measure lux, or luminosity. And this is the intensity of the light as we see it, humans, the brightness, basically. But this doesn't really translate directly over to plants. You can use light meters to get a general idea of how much light intensity is hitting your plant, but they're not going to tell you really the PAR, the photosynthetically active radiation. So let me break that down for you for a second. Photosynthetically active radiation. Well, light waves are packets of electromagnetic radiation. They're actually waves that are broken up into particles. The particles are the photons, and the photons carry the electromagnetic radiation. So that's the R in PAR, or the radiation part, taken care of. The radiation comes from the electromagnetic radiation that is in the small packet of energy called a photon that travels along the wavelength that is light. Now, photosynthetically active, the P and the A, these two actually are working together, because what this means is that the radiation is going to be directly activating photosynthesis. In other words, these are the wavelengths of light that the plant uses directly for photosynthesis. So when you measure the PAR, you're actually measuring all of the wavelengths within the area of photosynthetically active radiation for your plant. You're measuring all of those wavelengths, and then it's putting it together into a composite number. That number is measured in U-moles. The way that light energy is measured on one of these devices is going to be in micromoles over a linear centimeter. So now let's get into how to actually use one of these devices. So there are many different PAR meters on the market. This one is pretty inexpensive because it doesn't have an interface. The interface is your phone or a tablet or any other device that you can download this app onto and sync it to with Bluetooth. I'll link this one up in the description box below, as well as a few other PAR meters to give you some options. So when you fire this one up and you look in the app, at the top, we're going to see our micromoles over a linear centimeter, otherwise known as the PPFD. And this stands for photosynthetic photon flux density. So what the PPFD more directly measures is the PAR, or the photosynthetically active radiation, that's hitting a measuring tool at different distances from the light. So if we look at this PPFD map, actually, you can see that all these measurements are taken at different distances to give you the different maps here with the different numbers on them. Those numbers are the PPFD, and what they're measuring is the PAR. The other thing we really need to pay attention to is your DLI, or your daily light integral. This is a calculation of the PAR, the PPFD, over the amount of hours that your plant's going to be on. So I look at the DLI as the absolute final word for my lighting, and I look at the DLI probably more than anything now, to be honest with you. So here's what I recommend for your seedlings, your vegetative, and your flowering stage to have your PAR set at and to have your DLI set at. And the way you set your DLI on those light meters is you just adjust it to the amount of hours that your light's on, and it automatically tells you what your DLI is. Take a screenshot of this, write it all down, do whatever you need to do to make sure you get this information, because this is gold right here. All right, now 25% goes into training your plant. Without training your plant, without that optimal airflow, without optimal lighting, without the optimal environment, then basically everything we've done up to this point is for nothing. Without making sure that our plant can receive the lighting just absolutely optimally and can have perfect airflow for not just transpiration, for CO2 uptake, and to make sure we don't get bud rot. It also makes our stem stronger. Without training your plant, you're putting all of that stuff to waste. So these are the 4 ways that we train our plants in the 1 pound plant course. First is LST, or low stress training. This is basically when you just start to bend the branches down so they grow horizontally instead of vertically without breaking them. You can do this by tying them. I've laid just a long pipe across my bucket and actually started to tie the branches to the PVC pipe to get them to grow out horizontally. You do a lot of low stress training when you do a scrog. Scrog is a screen of green. Unlike a sea of green is when you use a bunch of plants to create a huge canopy that's just one layer. With the screen of green, it's one plant that we're training to lay out over an entire area, basically 4 feet by 4 feet. We're gonna use a net and lay it over top of the plant and low stress train the plant to grow out horizontally instead of vertically. We're going to do that for the entire vegetative stage. This is the most important thing that you're going to do to get those huge buds. This will keep your plant from getting those larvae buds and stuff that grows in the shade. Everything will be heavy weight on your plant if you do it with a scrogging technique, as long as you have the light dialed in. Next, defoliation. So when you defoliate, you're just removing leaves that are out of the light. So leaves underneath that aren't going to get any light, just go ahead and take those off. Or fan leaves that grow out and cover bud sites, we can take those fan leaves off too. And there are 2 different times during the grow that we can do heavy defoliations, more like 30% of the total mass. And that is right when we flip to flower, and about a month into flowering, you can do a heavy defoliation. Other than that, I would stay away from removing any more than 10% of the total leaves on your plant in any given day. Next is topping. So we top our plant when it's young, usually at the 4th or 5th node. You can do it earlier than that, but I like to wait until the 4th or 5th node until the plant is a little bit stronger. So when you top it, it keeps it from growing straight up, and instead it breaks it off into a Y. So obviously that can be really advantageous to us if we're trying to cover a canopy, a whole area with branches, and then allow them to grow up just a little bit, just the buds to grow up on the net. So what we do here is we're going to top it, and that'll make it grow into 1 Y, and then you'll pull the tops off of those to make 2 more Ys and lay those out horizontally. You can top it even more than that. That would depend on the strain you have. That topping technique, the triple top, is for Blue Dream Sativa, but if you're growing something that you really want to make sure is covering the entire Scrog, and you know it maybe doesn't make as big of buds as Blue Dream does, it makes smaller buds, so you need to have more veg before you flip, then topping the plant several times might be smart for you. Without topping the plant, you're just not gonna have enough branches going out all over the place underneath the Scrog net to really just hit that 1 pound mark. So you're definitely gonna have to top at least 3 times. That 1 time to get the first 2, and then I top those 2 to break those off into 2 more and send them out. But you can go crazy with topping if your strain isn't a heavyweight strain and you need more buds to reach that 1 pound mark. This plant right here went through all of the training. I have defoliated the bottom. I have low stress trained it on a scrogging net. So every single bud here is just an absolute monster bud. We have optimized airflow. We have optimized lighting. And this plant is ready to produce at least 1 pound. You can't really tell from this video, but I had about 10 about 18-inch long monster colas that were stacked up along the edges of the tent. There's one in the very background there, you can kind of see, but they're actually all around it, surrounding the sides, which were just absolute beautiful producers. So what we've just gone over is the framework for growing a 1 pound plant. You now know that you need to optimize your lighting. The Samsung Evo 6 is a great way to do that. You know you're going to need a 4x4 grow tent. We need ventilation to move the air around for transpiration to make sure that that stomata is working at its optimum, because we're going to need a lot of carbon dioxide in our tent, which only can be brought in with fresh air from that ventilation. And then moving the air around the leaves is critically important for getting this 1 pound mark. You now know that you need to train your plant in a scrogging technique. You need to do some low stress training. You need to top it a few times so that it stops growing straight up and grows out. You now also know how to measure par, which is one of the most important things for hitting a 1 pound plant. Measuring your lighting and then using that in accordance with the chart that I gave you. If you keep your PPFD and your DLI exactly where I told you, if you optimize your environment, if you lay out a scrog net and train your plant, and if you grow in a hydroponic deep water culture, then you will have no problem reaching that 1 pound plant. The 1 pound plant guide really walks you through step by step with 30 video lessons, each with a guide and a checklist and action steps, and my proven scientific method to harvest a 1 pound plant every single time. It really isn't luck. It's something that I've nailed down and repeated consistently, and I would love to teach you exactly how I did it in this course. And I promise you, even if you've never grown before, if you use the equipment that I use and follow this step-by-step course, you will harvest a 1 pound plus plant consistently over and over again. I hope this masterclass has been helpful for you. Make sure you go download the equipment guide and check out the school community. Both of those are really great free resources. I'm also doing a 1 week only sale on the course, just with the launch of this masterclass. I wanted to give you guys a deal. It is only 1 week long, so if you want to grab that deal and get the course, then make sure you take advantage of that while it's still available. All right, let's grow together.